The stage. Our next panel is going to hit on a topic that I heard many times yesterday, and that's around big data. And our moderator for this session, actually just a couple of weeks ago, held his own cloud analytics summit. So I couldn't think of a better person to kind of draw out the opportunities around big data from our panelists. So please welcome Jeff Kaplan, who is the Managing Director of THINKstrategies, and I'll let him introduce our panel as they get set. Jeff.
All right, thank you. Gentlemen and ladies. All right, thank you, Rihanna. Thank you all. It's a pleasure to be here. It's like deja vu all over again for me. Anjul and I were together 2 weeks ago, as Rihanna said, at an event that I hosted called the Cloud Analytics Summit, in which we had almost an equal number of folks just talking about what's happening in the cloud from an analytics and big data point of view. So this gives us an opportunity to revisit that topic and also to bring two other points of view to the panel as well. And it's my pleasure to have some pretty esteemed guests on this panel. And I'm going to let them do their own introductions because I want to then get into the worlds that they're living in and maybe pull back the onion a little bit on some of the things that they're seeing, both good and bad, about how the cloud is bringing new life to the world of analytics and helping us to better address the challenges of big data. So Anjul, why don't you start?
I'm Anjul Bhambre. I'm the Vice President of Development of Big Data Products at IBM. And I've been in the data space for my entire career, Sybase, Informix, and then IBM. So it's all been around structured data, relational databases. So the trends that we are seeing, and I got the end of the last presentation in terms of the new sources of data and what people want to do with it. And the new classes of analytic applications is definitely something that is very exciting, and we are seeing lots of usage in different industries, and which, of course, we'll share today.
That's great. And Chris, why don't you introduce yourself for anybody who didn't see or hear you yesterday?
Okay, thanks, Jeff. Good morning, everybody. I'm Chris Baker. I'm the Senior Vice President for Oracle's ISV and OEM business globally. I've been with Oracle for about 15 years. Prior to that, I worked for Digital for 13 years, and I'm a qualified civil engineer, so I just keep moving, basically. The interesting thing for me around all the things that we're talking about here is how do we deliver through a range of applications much better services for the end user customer who can run their business better. And I think all the things that we talk about, whether we're talking about the cloud and instant provisioning, and the previous speaker talking about having 3-4 year upgrade cycles and what have you, is just not acceptable to customers today. So it's how do we actually get the right things in front of those customers with the right applications, with the right information to make the best decisions.
Great. Shyla?
Thanks, Jeff. Yeah, good morning, everyone. My name is Shyla Rao. I work at Google. I'm responsible for our global business, sales, go-to-market, et cetera, for all our new products, which includes cloud platform, big data, storage, all the APIs, et cetera. And for me, it's just been a fascinating journey. I've been living in the cloud as a professional since 2003, and I've been living in the cloud personally, and all my family members have been living in the cloud for the last 2 years exclusively. And I think it shifted in my mind from what it used to be, the future of technology that we used to debate about all the time and how it's going to change. And to me, the real crux here is, as Michael just talked about earlier, is the future of work. And I think that's why it's just such a fascinating time to be in this industry and to be here and talk about some of these technologies. And I just think it's going to change our lives. It already has, but I just think we are just at the beginning of what I think is going to just transform our lives in ways that we can't even imagine at this point.
Yeah, my wife says I've been living in the clouds, or my head has been in the clouds for years, decades maybe, and now it's official, right?
That's right. Now all of us, the whole body is, yes.
So, we want to make this very interactive, which means including you in the process as well. So if you have any questions or comments that you want to add to the conversation, raise your hand, and there will be a microphone that will materialize sooner or later. What I want to do maybe is to frame the discussion in a couple of ways. I firmly believe that, while there's no question that there's an explosion of data and we don't need to have really documented what that's like, because we heard Michael talk about it and others yesterday as well. What's exciting about what the cloud brings is that the various layers of the cloud, the 3 layers of the cloud, opportunities to address the challenges of this explosion of data. At the infrastructure layer in terms of storage, at the platform layer in terms of developing new apps, and of course at the SaaS layer in terms of making that information more accessible to end users. What I want to get, just to start, is some perspective from each of the 3 of you on that point. Talk a little bit about what you're seeing in the marketplace and what gets you excited about what the cloud has to offer in terms of responding to the challenges of big data. And we'll start with you.
Sure. There's 2 things that I am seeing that I think is really exciting. One is, what I call the corporate tax rate. I mean, we all have a personal tax rate, right? And my philosophy is I go to work and I have a tax rate. There's always parts of my job that I don't like, but as long as it's like less than my personal tax rate, I think it's okay. If it's 80%, then I have to do something about it. But I think what cloud is doing is similarly. In the past, your corporate tax rate, in order to try these things out and do new things and innovate, everyone's talking about innovation. What is it that really fosters this innovation? Is the ability to experiment. Larry Page, always, we have this thing at Google, iterate early, fail often. I think what the cloud has done that I see fundamentally across all these industries is not, the technology has always been there in different forms, but I think it's allowed companies, ISVs in particular, the ability to experiment and have a lower tax rate at trying something out. So you may not know if this is going to work out. In the past, if you wanted to crunch through 5 terabytes of data just to see if there was some needle in that haystack, you had to put a certain amount of money up front. You could work with a vendor to try to spread out that payment over time and subscription and all of that stuff. But at the end of the day, whether it was CapEx or OpEx, you had to put that money up front. You had to budget for it and say, okay, we're going to try this big experiment. It's going to cost so much. And then you did an NPV analysis and figure that out. You don't have to do that anymore with the cloud. You want to crunch through 2 terabytes of data? Yeah, just point your browser to Google BigQuery or any other vendor, and you just try it out and see if there's something in there. So that's the one thing that I see is fundamentally changed. It's lowered what I call your corporate tax rate for productivity and innovation.
Chris, how about yourself?
I'd take a slightly different view of this. I think you've got to go back a little bit and say, where is the IT industry? And what does it mean to people who are using IT? And one of the things which I think is interesting is that it is the massive complexity, particularly in IT infrastructures, has caused a huge problem. It's taking far too long for people to get applications up and running. Everything is componentized. Everybody's desperately trying to make things work together that could never work together, and so on. And I think one of the exciting things about cloud is that actually people don't have to worry about that. Or do they? Somebody has to worry about it. Somebody has to think about it. Somebody has to think about how do you actually standardize architectures to give the things that Shirley's just talking about. And one of my concerns about the cloud, and particularly for things like software as a service vendors, is how do you make architectural decisions about the way you want to run your platforms to allow your application to scale and to be elastic and to do the things that you want to do, to allow people to provision things extremely quickly and so on. Because you still have to fix that architecture. If all cloud does is move a bunch of complexity from an in-house IT into a cloud provider, it'll be a false dawn. And we can't afford to have a false dawn. Because if I go and talk to most CEOs of the large customers of cloud or the large customers of IT companies, they all think they're paying too much for IT. And they're paying too much for IT for lots and lots of reasons. Cloud will reduce cost. Well, it will reduce cost as long as we drive complexity out at the same time. If we allow this complexity to keep on going, we're just moving the stuff around. And actually, we've got to be significantly better. And when data is growing at the speed that it's growing, all sorts of things start becoming a problem. Like, is there enough storage actually available to do the things that we need to do over the next 5 years? Really? Do people really understand compression techniques and what you need to do to actually manage data successfully? Do people really understand when you start taking in all this structured and unstructured data, what are they doing about archiving? What are they doing about query? How are they dealing with all those things? Now, there are lots of solutions, but if we just all think back in the componentization, we're just moving the problem. And I don't think that's the right answer. I think we've got to really start thinking about architectures and the use of these various different technologies on an on-demand basis, whilst not spending 3 years to try and upgrade stuff. Well,
it's interesting, and Jules, this is going to lead to you in a moment, but just as an observation, to generalize, I know this may not be exactly what you're talking about, you're suggesting this consumerization opportunity that we're seeing at an end user and executive level to maybe circumvent the challenges of IT in the past, and what you were describing as an exciting opportunity, you were bringing a more sobering note about how the IT is still involved. They have an opportunity to reduce the complexity, but they still have to contend with their own concerns about how you layer on this cloud piece to the existing infrastructure. So it's almost an IT versus a business debate, which we see all the time. And Jewel, what I've heard from IBM with a smarter theme that you guys have is how you're trying to bridge the gap. Talk about some of the things you're seeing and what excites you, and maybe respond to what you're hearing here as well.
So going to the point that removing the complexity from IT, setting up a cloud and a group dealing with that versus everybody being taxed in terms of how much, what the size of the cluster needs to be when you have to deal with this kind of data, and upfront trying to understand that as people are still trying to experiment with these new sources of data and trying to find those needles in the haystack, it definitely takes that away from people. So the point that Shailesh, you were making, when people want to just really do that experimentation and the discovery and that ad hoc analytics on these new sources of data to really even figure out what kind of things are important in this data, I think there we are seeing that a lot of enterprises are setting up private clouds, and it just helps that they can get started sooner. But there are also challenges that when you talk to certain enterprises, there is hesitation about putting your data out there. So to Chris's point, while it sounds much easier, in slides and charts and everything else, but when you actually go and talk to customers, there's hesitation in terms of people are still very concerned about the security and the privacy of the data, even within an organization, right? They don't want to, but at the same time, we are seeing the trend that rather than sharing that data across the enterprise, now at least they are thinking that by providing certain services which another department might need, that can be accomplished by setting up a private cloud and just providing access to that as services. So it's a mixed bag, I would say. There are lots of good stories, but when you look at the big enterprises, at least we are not seeing that the cloud is just mushrooming everywhere.
Okay, so let me just take a quick poll of hands here. How many folks in the audience are involved with selling to the enterprise decision makers? Probably a majority of folks here. Okay, so that's primarily your world as well, right? So to your point, all three of you, there's this tug of war between the increasingly empowered end user and the more demanding executive who wants better access to data, wants greater analytics. They think this cloud may be something of a panacea, but IT is pushing back, saying, hey, I love my servers, I want to hold on to these things for as long as possible. Talk about what you're doing to overcome that, because this audience, a majority of this audience is trying to present themselves in such a way to do the same thing. Sure. What are you doing to overcome those challenges?
Sure. To the earlier points. I mean, is there resistance? Yes. I mean, I think it would be crazy to argue that there isn't none. But but there is none. But here's how I look at it. It's like the airline industry in the beginning. When it came out, people were worried. Safe, secure. Can I get there from point A to point B? Yes. The valid concern. There are still people today who will not fly. Mm-hmm. Does that mean the airline industry is a bad idea? Does that mean there aren't all of us? Most of you flew here to probably get here. So I think this decision, the fact that there are certain people and there are certain industries and there are certain individuals, companies, etc., who are worried about, my data, my cloud, my private thing, doesn't mean that the bigger trend is real, and it doesn't mean, in my opinion, that this thing will not shift. Let me give you some data points. And I think we tend to get back to this idea of, oh, because of this all this concern, you know, I don't think it's real, or we have to worry about it. Yeah, those who want to worry about it can. Here's what we're doing. We are seeing companies every day switch and move across that barrier. And they're doing it through various means. They're doing it by themselves. They're doing it because their employees are coming with their own devices. They're coming because the CEO says, you know what, I have this iPad, make it work. And the CIO says, well, it's not a supported device. I don't care, make it work. 6 months later, it's standard. All those concerns, well, they've dealt with it. This concern, I think, it's not so much a concern about, you know, what we think about as, you know, it's security it's about control. And I think we're seeing the shift from I need to have control to I need to provide access. That's how I see the CIO shifting. And yeah, to be honest, there are certain places where we have a harder time selling this idea, but that doesn't stop 5,000 customers every day moving to Google Apps, all in the cloud with email and collaboration and productivity. And there are certain industries, you know, in my business with big data, I worked with oil and gas before in my other life. You know, they used to spend in the past, you know, what do they want to do? They spend a ton of money deciding where to drill that hole. We think they're buying technology. They're buying the decision on where to put that drill and how deep to dig. And they used to spend $5–7 million on technology to decide where to drill that hole. And then, yes, the billion will come afterwards if they dug it in the right place. That was a lot of technology. Today, what they're doing is they're putting that data in the cloud. There's no customer identifiable data. There's seismic data. There's geolocation data. There's latitude, longitude data. There's geographic, you know, rock data. That's not personal. That's not secure. They're putting it in the cloud. There's 2 petabytes of data that they can slice and dice. I'm talking about what they can do on our system, similar on others. And they're spending $300,000 to experiment. Maybe this is the right place to build that hole, to dig that hole. So now you have 12 chances to try to find that right hole to drill into, and you've still spent less money. So companies that we thought were traditional, never moved, are moving, and this is real. Will there be people who are concerned? There will be, but I think that shift is going to happen. And what we do is we just focus on the ones who want to move. And, you know, we are fairly successful at it.
Now, you're dealing, Chris, with some who want to move and some who don't. How are you dealing with those folks?
Well, you know, let's be realistic, right? It all comes down to definition of cloud. Shaila's talking mostly about public cloud, right? And that's fine, and I agree that there is a big move into people using public cloud for lots of reasons. Some of them you've stated, and I buy that, right? But public cloud providers also need to work out how they give this impression of infinite capacity. How do they give this impression of infinite bandwidth? How do they give this impression of infinite storage, and so on? And that is a fundamental decision that cloud providers have to think about, right? So that's an architectural decision that has to be made. Google will do it one way, other people will do it another, and so on, right? Part of my job is to ensure that people understand the benefits of different architectures to provide that service in a public environment. You know, it's not by accident that 9 out of 10 of the biggest software as a service providers use Oracle architecture underneath it, because it helps people to get that impression. It's not the only answer. We just happen to think it's the best. But I would say that, wouldn't I? But equally, you know, it's a bit like the private cloud thing. You know, I've talked to some CIOs of large organizations. Oh, yes, we're moving everything to the private cloud. Okay, so what's actually different in what you do? Actually different. You know, one guy said, well, actually, it's the way I wrote the email about it. Right, because the point really about this, right, was when you're in public cloud, Shaila's absolutely right. People move to it, they can do things quicker, they get an instant response, they get the things that they need, they can provision very quickly, etc., etc. Private cloud world, you know, actually in some ways it's sort of a little bit like outsourcing with a bit of chargeback in the front end of it, right, in some cases. Mm-hmm. And I do not subscribe to BAT because there is no cost reduction to that. Where is the benefit that comes out of it, or are you just reprocessing the IT department, right? And I am not convinced, right, that everybody has really got their head on what private cloud really means. And my view of this is a private cloud should be the same as public cloud in many ways. It should be infinitely elastic. It should be able to provide services very, very quickly. It should be able to allow people at the end user end to do the things that they want to do. It should be able to integrate to a whole different set of environments, and that could include other parts of the public cloud. It should be able to deal with massively different data requirements, which every company is having to deal with today, which is why you're getting some of the big data stuff going on. right? It's not just a reprocessor in an IT department is the point I'm trying to make, and that's why we got to be very careful that as an IT industry, we're not just drinking a whole bunch of very, very expensive drugs thinking that everything's really different. What we've got to do is we've got to think a great deal about what it means and how do you give this whole ability to move things very, very quickly and to get information out of systems and provision it in a different way. Chargeback mechanisms, the taxing methodology that Shailesh was talking about, yeah, that's sort of a bit, are we really still there? People should really be thinking about paying for what they use and so on. And I can give examples of companies who have created private clouds properly, right, who have managed to get utilization 80, 90% when they were running at 10, 20%. Running chargeback scenarios, which means that actually the business is getting much more benefit out of the IT provision, whether it was internal or external becomes irrelevant, right? Well, what they're getting back is something much better because IT is providing what the business needs.
All right, so give us some of those examples in a moment.
I can keep talking.
I know you can. That's why I'm stepping in. Angel, in your world, most of us believe there are three pieces to the IBM puzzle. There's a hardware piece, there's a software piece, and there's a services piece. All of them somehow get involved in this discussion. Again, the fundamental question, how do we help an organization, an enterprise, deal with this tug of war between the business side and the IT side? Talk about how you're working with those three entities to make that happen.
So, I think these are very all interesting points. Some, we see, some we don't with our enterprise customers. Now, from the standpoint of a lot of the enterprise world, right? There are new classes of applications, there are new types of data that they want to analyze, and there is the experimentation phase. But very soon, of course, if that data has to be brought in the enterprise, maybe it starts with the cloud, maybe it doesn't. But it has to, in most cases, integrate with the rest of their, whether it may be their warehouse, whether it may be their content repositories. So there is that integration phase that is also needed, right? So when people are trying to gain information from these new sources of data, it's not that they want to build another silo, which the cloud could become a silo, for example. So the crux of what people, at least what we hear from the CIOs and the CMOs, is not that they want to discard their existing applications or their existing maybe CRM systems, but they want to augment that with these new sources of data and these new insights, and really correlate information from the existing data sources, data repositories, applications with these new sources, and be able to, because of this correlation, really gain the new insights which were not possible if they were just looking at all of these silos. So a very important part when people or these kinds of customers want to go and really deploy these solutions, integration with the rest of the applications and the systems becomes a critical part as well. So from the standpoint of what are we doing? Of course, we provide hardware, software, as well as services, right? To set up cloud, to implement these kinds of solutions. We have come up with new offerings to help analyze these new types of, what we call as big data in terms of the large volumes and variety, and this data that is a continuum, right? It's not like you analyze 2 petabytes of data and it stops. It continues to grow. So, and we are deploying these in the IBM cloud, as well as, people have an option to go on Amazon. So they could build their cloud using any of these options, but we are also making sure that we are providing the right set of capabilities so that it does integrate with the other traditional applications and warehouses and repositories where people have made a lot of investment, because we don't see that going away. The customers don't see that going away. Overnight, that's not going to happen, right? 20 years later, who knows, but it's not an overnight trend.
All right, so I'm going to challenge you two and even you on where you sit in this marketplace, because some people, cynics, maybe like myself or others, might say, IBM, Oracle, you're part of the old problem. I mean, you gave us these big systems, you gave us this complicated software, you sent these armies of consultants in, and look, we still have this big mess. Why should I be coming back to you to solve this problem, which you may have helped to exacerbate? What's your response?
So going to that we gave the big problems, if you look at every time you do a transaction using your ATM, 8 out of 10 of those ATM transactions would be running on IBM hardware and software, and I don't think we've stopped doing those transactions. So it's like there is those things are not going to go away. I keep emphasizing that. There is obviously new classes of applications, there is new trends, what has happened in the last couple of years around the type of data that, there's obviously a lot of talk about social media, right? But when we look at big data and the kinds of things that people are trying to do in the healthcare industry and in the telco industry, and in, it's not just about social media. Right? It is, so big data is definitely beyond social media. I'm not saying social media is not an important part of it. Retail industry wants to leverage social media along with their enterprise data, right? So it's not like one or the other. It has to come together because that's what makes it really important, more valuable, gaining new knowledge. But when you look at telco, right, yes, people have been analyzing call data records forever, but the kind of volumes that they are seeing now is just huge, right? Just because, we've all seen the proliferation of the devices and the usage of these devices. So will those same technologies continue to be effective when we see these kinds of large volumes is the question. So again, we are working with major telco providers, and they have invested a lot in building their and analyzing their call data records, cleansing them, building warehouses around it. But now there is a need where a lot of them, they have volumes up to 6 billion call data records a day, right, which have to be analyzed in real time or as near real time as possible to maybe prevent customer churn. So would we recommend to them that use the same approach that you used before? Probably not, right? Because the cost would go to the roof, the time that it would take to cleanse and this data and really get that kind of information, by the time the churn would have happened. So we are developing obviously new technologies to make sure that without spending that upfront time of prepping the data and cleansing it and making its way in the warehouse and then getting that information out can be eliminated or minimized. Good. So it's like new technologies are obviously being developed. We have streaming capabilities which can analyze this kind of data in real time, whether it be in telco, whether it be in healthcare, where there's a lot of sensor data that gets gathered from patients, right? So this is work we did with the University of Ontario. And they had to process 1,000 pieces of information per second per a newborn baby. And that is not something that we'll say, let's put it in the warehouse. You need different kinds of technologies for those kinds of things.
So Chris, you guys have been positioning yourself as a major enabler of building cloud infrastructures and the rest. Some people might suggest that you're repurposing the same old stuff. What's new about what Oracle is doing in this space?
Repurposing the same old stuff. Interesting. I would put it slightly differently.
Go ahead. The floor is yours.
It's all about consistency, but it is all about simplification. The work that we're doing, and this is very relevant to cloud, but it's also very relevant to the needs of the IT industry, is that we've spent a lot of time investing in how do we take hardware and software and engineer them to work together very closely to give massive performance gains, but more importantly, standardized architectures. And why is that important? Well, when you start talking about the massive data volumes that Anjul was talking about, actually you do have to process these things much, much quicker. You've got to be able to do that on demand. You've got to be able to do it much quicker. And you can't spend the time continually building a huge consulting organization or a consulting project to try and pull these things together to make it happen. It's got to happen out of the box. So the work that we're doing is making sure that by engineering the hardware and the software together, you can have a standard box, standard architecture. They're all the same, right, with infinite expandability. If you want twice the speed, you just shove another one in. It goes twice the speed. It's available. It shares everything across the environment and so on. It gives that impression of infinite capacity because you just add more stuff or take it away if that's what you want to do. It gives you business continuity, all the things that you need when you're in a cloud type of environment. It's about simplicity and agility. It's about the ability, because you know that all these architectures are exactly the same, whether you're talking in the database layer or the middle tier, to be able to do that is something which is different. Right now, let me give you an example. Right, I was working in the eastern side of Europe, and a government who wasn't working in the cloud, I would quickly add, but a government on the eastern side of Europe had a bit of a problem. They spent about 9 months doing an assessment about what their new set of equipment was going to be. The problem was that they spent so long doing the assessment, they had less than a month to go from delivery of what they wanted to actually going into production. By the way, their previous event had taken them about 9 months before they got even into testing. Because they were just running an Oracle database, they moved on to a standard engineered system. They went into pre-production in less than 5 days. They went into full production for the whole country in this environment in 23 days. Right? Why? Because it was a standard system. They knew it would work. They knew it would expand because it was just a standard system. It just ran the stuff that they were doing. In some ways, that's what people have to do in the cloud. Not in 5 days, but in 5 seconds or 5 minutes. You can only do that if your infrastructure is standard. That's where we're putting all of it, whether it be in the analytics layer, whether it be in the middle tier, whether it be in the database layer, or indeed in the big data environment.
Good. All right, I'm going to turn the question around. Don't answer it yet, though, because I want to make sure that we give the audience an opportunity to raise their hands. So if you have a question you'd like to ask, raise your hand now, and I'll turn back to you in a moment after I ask this question of this guy. All right, so raise your hand. There's somebody down here I can see, there may be others. All right, so I'm going to turn around just a little bit. Yeah. All right, so in your case, nobody can accuse you of not being an innovative company, but many people can accuse you of somewhat being ambivalent about the question of privacy and security. So how do you respond to that?
I think when it comes to, we do everything possible to, all the data that you store is your data, and we make it very clear through all our terms of service, and the data is owned by you. And there are some perceptions that we have to fight with as a company, and we try to do the best job we can of doing that. I think at the end of the day, it comes down to, Chris, you were talking about the architectures, and you put another box in there, you take another box out, and I think therein lies the key. Can you do it that way? Yes, you can. But do you need to? No, I don't think you need to. You can just not have to worry about that new box, putting in new storage or putting in anything, because that's what Google, we can scale up and down infinitely. And to your point, Anjul, about a telco, we're actually working with a telco that is a customer of one of the two people that's on the panel here, that is actually doing exactly that. They're taking petabytes of CDRs and they're moving it in the cloud and they're analyzing it in sub-second time at a fraction of the cost. There's no customer data here. It's just call records. It's the standard stuff, who made what call, which, when, where, to decide by putting in geodata where I should put my next tower. That's my point. The shift is happening. Will there always be people who will say, no, I won't? Yes. Will there be people who are doing it as we speak? Yes, they are, because they're saving 40, 50, 70% of the time and budget because they're moving this stuff into the cloud. They know Google can scale. I mean, our caffeine index, which we just released recently, if you stack it up, it's 40 miles long. The index itself, and our average search on that index is 200 milliseconds. I dare you, I challenge you to go put that infrastructure in place in your company. Can you do it? Sure. Can you buy enough technology with enough time? Can you do it? No, but do you really have to? You could have a power plant in your backyard to get electricity. You could have your own cable station, but you plug it into an outlet. That's what I think. I mean, this idea of a private cloud, please, coming from Google, we're only in the public cloud, I think it's like a paperless office. That's my personal opinion. Great idea, And if you're in the paper business, that's what you're going to sell. We're in the information business. The idea is not about having that paper. It's about, do you get that information at the right time? So I can see people who sell paper saying, that's where you need to buy all this stuff. You need to buy it from us. We think, no. We have that infrastructure. That's what we've been doing from day one as a company. And you can run this stuff, and the shift is happening. And I think that's what we're doing. I mean, there will be, like I said, there will be certain companies, certain industries, and certain CIOs, in my opinion, whose role also is changing as a result of this. Let me give you one example. Large company, traditional company, CMO asks the CIO, I want to try this thing out. CIO says, yeah, sure, but we've got these 17 projects we're working on, but because you're the CMO, I'm going to fit you in at number 8. And an ISV, like one of the companies in this room, was in the meeting, said, okay, let me check something out. Went on to, I know, again, they did this on Google, so I'm sure this is happening with other places. 2 weeks. Ran it on Google App Engine, tried this out, and I'll come back to the architecture point because I disagree to some extent with Chris on this stuff. 2 weeks, they had an application that just lit up the CMO's eyes and made the CIO look rather incompetent in this case. And they're actually moving with this stuff. Why? It's that experiment, it's that innovation I was talking about. You get a chance to try it out. To your point about the architecture, theoretically, yes. I have to decide about all these architectures. I think practically that's not true. You don't have to worry about this. If you're on, again, our cloud or any other public cloud, you don't have to. That is the beauty of this thing. Outfit 7, small gaming company. How many of you have kids who play talking cat, talking dog, talking all these animals? Less than 10 people based out of Cyprus. I bet most of you don't know about them. When they launched this app, 350 million downloads. Now, are you telling me that for that application, architecture wasn't important? Of course not, it was. But do you think they thought about it? No. They worried about what app to build, and it's a cool app, took off like crazy, and it scaled. Google scaled it. 350 million downloads, didn't even blink. So this idea that you have to spend all this time thinking about the architecture, you can choose to think about it because that's what you choose to do. I don't think you need to. And that is where I think the cloud and this big data, this is where it's going, is all that tax burden that you had on innovation and productivity can be removed. Whether you want to remove it or not is up to you.
Well done. Okay. Stew on that for a moment. I promise somebody out here that they'd be able to ask you a question. Go ahead.
Okay. Well, this all sounds good, but and saying we don't really need to think about it a long time. But the whole issue where the data is. I mean, so I got Google BigQuery, but I got data in web logs on my ops source server, and I got some other data in the Salesforce CRM, and so I have petabytes, or at least tens or hundreds of terabytes that I need to move around. So it seems there's a huge barrier. I mean, I'd love to use BigQuery, but my data's not on Google, and I could FedEx you 100 terabytes of data, but I mean, how is this going to work? It seems like a big data, moving the data around is a big barrier.
All right. I'm going to let
I want
you
to
go
answer
ahead.
that.
Yep.
You're absolutely right that people are not going to be moving all of their data around. So at least our recommendation and approach to all of this is data is going to live where data is, and the analytics, whether it be in the warehouse, whether it has to be done in real time, whether it has to be done with the data that can be on the cloud, has to be done where the data is. And so the approach that at least we recommend is that we have to federate, right? Data is not going to be moved around. Deep analytic capabilities have to be provided in all of these different systems. And then what we have to do is we have to aggregate the results of these, correlate the information across these, and be able to present those to the business users so that they are not just getting a view or an analysis which is based on one silo. So the approach here is to break the silos, to federate, and not really, really get the volumes that we are talking about. It's not practical to move that data around.
Chris, thoughts?
Well, very quickly, my view is that most organizations do not have a data management strategy, genuinely a data management strategy. They might have an IT strategy when that IT strategy might be using Google. to play talking cats and dogs, or it might be whatever it may be. But
or drill holes for oil.
Or drill holes for oil. Same sort of thing, really.
Similar.
The key for me is that most organizations, whatever their IT provision, have got to now think about this huge amount of data, what they're going to do with it, how they're going to move it around, because it is a problem moving it around. Right? And you've got to be able to have the analytic capability where it's needed. Right? And where it's needed is at the business user. So I sort of buy into what Angela's saying, that you need to make sure that it's there. But people need to think about this stuff, right? You know, the amount of data that is flying around, right, you've got to start thinking, well, what am I going to do with it? What am I going to use it? It's about acquiring the data. It's about organizing the data, and it's about analyzing the data. And you've got to think about some of those things. It's not just about running an app in a public cloud, right? You know, if you are in Switzerland, you're not allowed to take data out of Switzerland if you're in a banking industry, right? Fact. If you are a supplier, right, to a bank in Switzerland, you're not allowed to take data out of Switzerland. Fact. It doesn't matter whether you're public cloud, private cloud, you know, a PC-based company or a tablet company, it doesn't matter. So there are different issues in different parts of the world which have to get handled. That's a data management strategy issue, not a data management technology issue.
There's another question somewhere out there. Stan, please. Back there. Okay, go ahead.
Appreciate the conversation. Wanted to, if possible, move it up the stack a little bit. Certainly understand the infrastructure. Our company does the billing for Microsoft Azure, so got that. But if you guys could maybe unpack for a little bit, and Chris, maybe you were beginning to do that for me, at the application layer, when you look at folks today, will the traditional enterprise application providers be able to make that transition, or are we really going to see the innovation of marrying big data with applications for the newer folks? Because Chris, to your point, there are all of these data management issues, but to Shailesh's, I'm sorry, did I pronounce that correctly? Shailesh, your name there. The simplicity and the application kind of being easier to use, it seems like there are two very different camps. For new application providers and olders, and will the older ones actually make the big data transition? So, sorry to
Chris,
unpack it.
You want to?
Yeah, really, really quickly. You know, application providers, on-premise stuff is not going to disappear overnight. It's just not going to happen, right? For all the reasons that Shailesh said, it's just not going to happen. Right? There are going to be hosting environments, there's going to be software as a service environments, there's going to be cloud environments, et cetera, right? You know, the whole world is suddenly not going to suddenly go, we're kicking out all of our old application providers and we're using to new sexy ones. That's not going to happen either, right? Because we're in a relatively mature industry. My view is that what people have to work out is the old days as an application provider where you said, I don't care what the platform is. You know, it can run on IBM, it can run on Microsoft, it can run on Oracle, it can run on Google, it can run on anything, right? I don't care because I just write my application. That's what's dying. Because application providers have to decide what their platform architecture is going to be. Because in a cloud-type world, in a pay-as-you-go type world, you can't afford to support hundreds and hundreds of different architectures. You've got to make a decision, and it's got to be one. It's got to be one architecture, whether you're on-premise, whether you're hosted, or whether you're software as a service, right? And that's a big decision for some of the application providers, which they're going to have to make pretty soon.
Good.
I think to your point, sir, on terms of the companies, this is what I'm seeing. I think the next generation of application providers, where I see them making the switch, if I were to pick companies, I would say it's the newer ones. Because they're the ones that don't have the legacy, they're not going on this hike with the big piano on their back. And they're able to make that shift. You know, Crystalloid's a customer, or a small customer, they built a nice application. It's an ISV, like all of you, for the hospitality industry, right? Analyzing data in the engine and being able to give real-time information so you can sell that room at the last minute. Or another company that built a custom CRM application for the real estate industry, and there are all these new startups. On the existing environments and existing application providers, I think it's really a function that I see of the person in charge at the customer. We see large companies moving, Ahold in Netherlands, and they're doing it because I think the management team, the executive team says, look, there is a new way, we've got to try it out. So I think there's two ways. There's either existing companies, entrenched companies that are moving to this new world because they have a team that wants to move there, or there are these small up-and-coming companies, which I think are going to redefine the landscape over the next many years, and that's where I see that shift. As far as to your earlier question about, you know, the gentleman in the front about how we get all of this data, and to Anjul's point, Again, I think, yes, the data has to be there, it has to be federated. Here's how we do it with Google. We have partnerships with companies like Store Simple, Panjura, Zamunda, all of these little startups, very nimble companies like yourselves. Stick an appliance inside the premise and they take a signature of your data and they basically move this stuff into the cloud where it's analyzed in real time, and they do a very good job at it because clearly there's data in all these systems and they don't want it siloed, I agree. But I don't think that the solution, as I see it, is to have it all in-house. It's just way too expensive and not as productive. You can move it up and you can do it in ways where, all the hot data stays on board. As it gets warmer and colder, you move it up, slice it. And to your point, Chris, about where's the data being accessed, I tell you where it's accessed, here most of the time. Not in front of that machine with those big cubicle walls. I think that's the shift that's happening. Yes, it has to be accessible anywhere, as long as I have an internet connection, which, last time I checked, 700 million people around the world have it, and there'll be 1.5 billion in the next 2 years, because it's growing at 700%. So yeah, it can be accessed anywhere. The fact that it's in the cloud only makes it easier. And that, I think, is the shift that's happening, and it's there, it's happening today, whether you're a small company or an existing company. That's my take.
All right, so we've run out of time, but we have good news, which is that we're running into a break, which means that you can corral these folks here or outside, at least through the break. I know you, Chris, have got to leave pretty quickly, so he may be scurrying, so you may have to get him on the road. But the point is this. What you've heard is 3 different points of view about the realities, the opportunities, as well as the challenges regarding big data. For you, primarily as an ISV-oriented community, you have an opportunity to figure out how you want to align yourself with these kinds of players, because that's going to be essential for your success. There's things you can learn from them, there are things you can take advantage of with them, and there are ways in which you can utilize them to meet your business objectives in the marketplace. So I hope this was a good opportunity for you to hear more about what they're thinking, what they're doing, and how you might be able to work with them to be successful. Help me thank them for their time, and thank you for your patience. Well done.
Thank you. shrao@google.com.
Thanks, Chris.
There you go.
That's how we can work together. Thank you.
Nice to meet you.
Thanks.
Well done, Chris. Very good. All right, folks. Oops, we're here. Go ahead.
Thank you, Jeff.
Sure, my pleasure. It's great.
Okay, Jeff.
Yep.
Thank you, Jeff, and everybody. We are taking a break until 11 o'clock. There'll be some coffee and stuff set up in the display room if you'd like to get some networking in. 11 o'clock.